The global community's climate protection plans are insufficient to achieve the 1.5-degree target. As a United Nations report shows, the Earth is currently heading for significantly greater warming. Shortly before the start of the UN climate conference, the COP26 in Glasgow in Scotland, the UN published an alarming report on the current climate policy of the global community. The states must therefore increase their climate protection efforts sevenfold in order to achieve the 1.5-degree target. With the current national climate protection plans, greenhouse gas emissions can only be reduced by 7.5% by 2030, according to the report published by the UN Environment Programme, the UNEP, on Tuesday. In order to limit global warmings to 1.5 degrees as agreed in the Paris Climate Agreement, a reduction of 55%, that's around sevenfold, is necessary. Even for the 2-degree target, a reduction of 30% would be necessary. In order to have a chance of limiting global warmings to 1.5 degrees, we have 8 years to almost halve greenhouse gas emissions, said UNEP Executive Director Inga Andersen. The world needs to wake up and become aware of the impending danger we face as a species. Every year, the UNEP report, Emissions Gap Report, determines the gap between the expected emissions and the values that are necessary to achieve the Paris climate targets. The international community agreed in Paris at the end of 2015 to limit global warmings to well below 2 degrees, but if possible to 1.5 degrees compared to the pre-industrial age. With the Paris Climate Agreement, the signatory states have committed themselves to submitting new, more ambitious national climate protection contributions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions every 5 years. But according to UNEP, the world is headed for a warming of 2.7 degrees in this century, with a plan submitted by around 120 countries. According to the report, the corona pandemic led to an unprecedented decline in global emissions of 5.4% in 2020. But even this cut is not enough to achieve the 1.5-degree target. The global community must therefore reduce its emissions of carbon dioxide or its equivalent in other greenhouse gases by 28 billion tons annually by 2030. For comparison, carbon dioxide emissions alone are expected to be 33 billion tons in 2021. Anne Olof, co-author of the report, sees some progress since the Paris Agreement. The state's new climate targets would save 4 billion tons of CO2 equivalent per year by 2030. But of course, that is far from sufficient, she emphasized. And overall, we are very far from where we should be. If all countries were to fully implement their net zero emissions targets, there is a 66% probability that global warming could be limited to 2.2 degrees, according to the UNEP report. A total of 49 countries, which are responsible for around half of global greenhouse gas emissions, have committed to net zero emissions. However, UNEP criticizes that its plans are vague and not reflected in the NDCs. In this year's UNEP report, the role of methane, one of the strongest greenhouse gases, in the climate crisis was examined in particular. The experts came to the conclusion that existing technology at little or no cost could reduce man-made methane emissions by 20% per year. The UNEP report was published a few days before the UN climate conference COP26, which is considered to be crucial for achieving the Paris climate goals. From October 31st, the governments in Glasgow, Scotland will be negotiating how they can actually meet the goals of the agreement. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.